Now that Mandalorian and Grogu is finally out, I've officially decided to rank all 13 Star Wars movies. Yes, all of them. And before the hardcore fans come at me with their lightsabers, yes, I know there's also the random made-for-TV Ewok spin-offs lurking in the galaxy somewhere, but I haven't watched those movies yet, so we're sticking with the main movies for now. Before we jump into the ranking, can we please hit the like goal of 100 likes? If we do, I might survive the comment section after putting someone's favourite movie below Attack of the Clones. And just remember, this is my ranking, so if your favourite movie's at the bottom, take a deep breath, touch some grass, and use the force to calm you down. In last place with a painful score of 2 out of 10, we've got Star Wars The Last Jedi. Yeah, I already know some people are typing angry essays in the comments. Now look, I tried to like this movie, I really did, but this film honestly feels like it looked at everything set up in Force Awakens and just went, yeah, nah, never mind bro. First off, Luke Skywalker. You're telling me the same guy who believed there was still good in Darth Vader suddenly thinks about murdering his nephew because he had a bad dream? Nah man, that never sit right with me. Even Mark Hamill admitted he struggled with the direction they took Luke in.
Figure out, who is this guy? How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit who says it's time for the Jedi to end? I read that and I said, what? I mean, that's not what a Jedi does. I mean, a Jedi is optimistic, a Jedi has tenacity, he never gives up, he doesn't secrete himself on an island.
And then we got all the mystery box stuff from The Force Awakens completely thrown out the window. Who are Rey's parents? Nobody's. Who is Snoke? Doesn't matter. Bro, what? Before sequel fans come sprinting at me with pitchforks, Rey's parents literally got retconned later anyway, because she ended up being related to Palpatine. So the whole your parents are nobody thing didn't even fully stuck, so why wasn't it even in the movie? Then there's the Holdo and Poe drama, which could have honestly been solved with like one conversation. The entire conflict is basically Poe, what's the plan? Holdo, no. Like bro, this is a war, not a group project. And don't even get me started on the Canto Bight side quest. Finn and Rose spent what feels like 7 business days at Space Las Vegas just for the mission to be completely fail anyway. You could remove half the plotline and basically nothing changes. Also, the slow speed chase, this is Star Wars. Why are we watching ships crawl through space like they're stuck behind a tractor on a country road? And the Human Man, some of the jokes felt straight out of Marvel deleted scenes. For example, General Hux getting prank called at the start had me sitting there like, am I watching a Star Wars movie or a Disney Channel original movie? Then there's the Holdo maneuver. Visually insane, actually looked beautiful, but lore-wise it opens so many questions, because if hyperspace kamikaze attacks are that overpowered, why has nobody been doing that for the last 40 years of Star Wars? Now to be fair, the movie does have good stuff. The visuals are incredible, Kylo Ren is honestly one of the best parts of the sequels, and that throne room fight scene was cold, even though it kinda didn't make any sense. But overall, this movie just didn't feel like a Star Wars movie to me. It felt like the franchise was trying way too hard to subvert expectations instead of telling a satisfying story. Next up we've got The Rise of Skywalker with a score of 3 out of 10. And honestly, this movie feels less like a finale and more like Disney panicking in real time. This whole sequel trilogy clearly had no actual plan. You can literally feel 2 different directors fighting for control of the story across the 3 movies. First off, The Force Awakens sets everything up. The Last Jedi throws half of it away. The Rise of Skywalker spends the entire runtime trying to undo The Last Jedi. It generally feels like the cinematic version of, wait, the fans hated that, change everything quick. And then somehow Palpatine returns. No build up, no real explanation, just somehow Palpatine returns. But what does that even mean? You're telling me Anakin sacrificed himself in Return of the Jedi to destroy the Empire, just for the grandpa to respawn like he's playing Fortnite. And the pacing in this movie is insane. The characters never sit still for more than 8 seconds. It's basically go here, find this clue, that clue leads to another clue, that clue leads to a dagger, the dagger leads to another planet, the planet leads to another clue. The whole movie feels like a Star Wars side quest simulator. And then Rey, being nobody special, gets completely reversed because apparently everybody has to be related to someone important. Like the entire point of The Last Jedi was saying heroes can come from anywhere. Then this movie goes, actually never mind, she's Palpatine's granddaughter. The dialogue also feels super rushed. Everybody talks like they drank 14 coffees before filming. Half of the conversations are just characters yelling exposition at each other while sprinting through hallways. And again, the Marvel style humor just does not land for me in Star Wars. There are moments that are supposed to feel emotional or serious, and then someone drops a random quip like they're auditioning for the Avengers. Now look, visually the movie does have cool moments. Kylo Ren is still carrying these sequels on his back. The lightsaber fights are solid, and seeing all the ships arrive at the end was pretty hype. But as the ending of the Skywalker saga, nah man, this movie feels like a rushed apology letter. Next up we've got Star Wars The Clone Wars movie with a score of 4 out of 10. And before anybody attacks me in the comments, I love the Clone Wars series. The show is peak Star Wars. But the movie? Yeah, this honestly just feels like 3 random episodes taped together and thrown into cinemas. Because that's basically what happened. This wasn't even originally planned as some big cinematic Star Wars movie. It generally feels like Lucasfilm looked at a few unfinished TV episodes and went, yeah, put this in theaters, we ball. And because of that, the movie never feels big. The story is not really epic. The entire plot is literally about rescuing Jabba the Hutt's kidnapped baby. Like bro, this is called the Clone Wars, and somehow the main mission is babysitting Rotta the Hutt, aka Stinky. Yes, the same Rotta the Hutt we see in Mandalorian and Grogu. And also, before everyone gets mad, yes, Ahsoka Tano becomes one of the best Star Wars characters ever later on. But in this movie, oh my days was she annoying. The non-stop nicknames like Sky Guy had me fighting for my life. Anakin's trying to lead a war, and she's out here sounding like she's in a Disney XD sitcom. Thankfully, the show massively improves her character over time, because early Clone Wars Ahsoka was rough. The animation also hasn't aged great. I know it was 2008, but some of these characters move like NPCs in a PS2 cutscene. Everything feels stiff, awkward, and unfinished compared to how insane the animation gets in later seasons. And the dialogue. Yeah, even by the prequel standards, this movie has some painful, cringy lines. Zero the Hutt especially.
After all these years, my most trusted of assassins has finally failed.
Like, what is even that voice, bro? Every time he spoke, I felt like I was losing force sensitivity. But honestly, the biggest problem with this movie, it was just so unnecessary. You can literally skip the film, start the Clone Wars show, and you barely miss anything important. The series improves in basically every possible way. Better stories, better animation, darker moments, better character development, everything. So yeah, the Clone Wars movie is not good. But the Clone Wars show though, that's a completely different conversation. Next up we've got Solo: A Star Wars Story with a score of 5 out of 10. And honestly, this movie is the definition of, yeah, it exists. Like, I don't hate it, but do we actually need it? Not really. The biggest problem with Solo is that it feels obsessed with explaining every tiny detail about Han Solo like it's filling out a Wikipedia page. For example, how did Han get his last name?
What's your name, son?
Han.
What? Who are your people?
I don't have people. I'm alone.
Solo.
Another example is how did Han and Chewie meet? And so many others, like how did he get the blaster, how did he win the Falcon, how did he do the Kessel Run. Bro, we get it. It generally feels like the movie had a checklist of Han Solo facts and refused to leave the studio until every single one gets explained. And honestly, that kind of ruins the mystery of Han's character for me. Part of what made Han cool in the original trilogy was that he felt like this experienced smuggler with years of crazy stories behind him. But this movie makes it look like every important thing in his life happened over the course of one really busy weekend. Like, imagine if they made a Darth Vader movie and explained where he bought his boots. Like, come on. Also, the stakes never really feel that high because it's an origin story. We already know Han, Chewie, and Lando survive. So whenever the danger happens, we're kind of just sitting there like, yeah, right, bro, you'll be fine. And while Kiara and Beckett are decent characters, they never really hit emotionally in the way the movie wants them to. Now, production-wise, this movie was low-key cursed. The original directors got fired halfway through the filming because Lucasfilm apparently hated their style. Then Ron Howard came in and reshot a massive amount of this movie. And honestly, you can kinda feel it while watching it. Some scenes feel super fun and chaotic, then suddenly the movie becomes weirdly safe and generic. It feels like two different movies fighting each other for control. And timing-wise, this film was doomed from the start as well. It dropped right after The Last Jedi, divided the fanbase into Civil War mode. Plus, it had to compete with Avengers Infinity War and Deadpool 2. Like, bro, Disney sent this movie into battle with no backup. Now, to be fair, the movie does have some good stuff. Like, Aldrich Enric actually does a decent job as young Han. Donald Glover as Lando was probably the best casting choice in the whole movie, and the train heist scene was generally cool. But overall, this movie just feels unnecessary. Next up, we've got The Phantom Menace with a score of 5.3 out of 10. And honestly, this movie had good ideas, but it was poorly executed. Because when you actually look at what this movie adds to Star Wars, it's kind of insane. This film massively expands the galaxy. We get to see Coruscant for the first time, the underwater Gungan cities, Naboo looking all beautiful and rich, the Jedi at their peak. It generally made Star Wars feel way bigger than before. The world building in this movie is honestly elite. But at the same time, the actual movie itself can feel so stiff sometimes. Like, there are scenes with characters talking about politics for so long that it starts feeling like a space parliament simulator. Half of the acting as well has no emotion. And then there's Jar Jar Binks. Yeah, I know some people defend him now, but bro was generally unbearable at times. George Lucas really looked at this massive sci-fi saga and said, you know what this needs? More stepping on poop jokes. But this movie also introduced one of my favourite characters in Star Wars ever, Darth Maul. And man, Darth Maul has aura. Bro barely even talked in this movie, and somehow he becomes one of the coolest characters in the whole franchise. The double-bladed lightsaber reveal was so iconic. And then we get the Duel of Fates. Oh my days. That final fight between Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Maul is still one of the best lightsaber fights in Star Wars history. The choreography, the music, the energy was absolute cinema. John Williams absolutely cooked with that soundtrack, and honestly, the pod race scene is still amazing too. The sound design alone makes it feel so intense, and you can tell George Lucas had so many cool ideas in this movie. The problem is though, it's just that the pacing and dialogue hold it back hard. There's a generally great Star Wars movie hidden in there somewhere, but the movie never fully reaches its potential. Still though, it deserves credit for setting up so many important lore for the prequels and showing the Republic before everything goes horribly wrong. Next up, we have the most recent Star Wars movie in this list, in The Mandalorian and Grogu, with a score of 6 out of 10. And honestly, this movie was so unnecessary. Like, don't get me wrong, I had fun watching it. Mando is still cool, Grogu is still adorable, and half the cinema was probably making baby noises every time he appeared on screen. But as an actual Star Wars movie, yeah, it really just feels like a couple of episodes of a show stitched together, kind of like the Clone Wars movie. Also, the whole movie kind of has a side quest energy vibe. It never really feels like it's some huge galaxy changing event. It's more like, alright, Mando go here, fight this thing, babysit Grogu, leave and repeat. And honestly, that works fine for a Disney Plus episode, but when you go to the cinema for a Star Wars movie, you expect something bigger. Like, compare this stuff to the Revenge of the Sith or even Rogue One, where it generally feels like a history is changing in front of you. This movie never really reaches that level. The stakes feel super low most of the time because you already know Mando and Grogu are surviving. Disney's not killing off the tiny green money printer anytime soon. That being said though, the practical effects and creature designs are honestly great, and you can tell where the budget went because some of the aliens and creatures looked amazing. It also has the old school 80s sci-fi adventure vibe sometimes, which I actually liked. There are definitely fun action scenes also, nothing mind-blowing but enough to keep the movie entertaining. The problem is just that it never leaves a huge impact on you. Like, after the credits roll, I kind of just sat there thinking, yeah, that was alright, not terrible, not amazing, just solidly mid. And honestly, if you were expecting a cinematic masterpiece, yeah, lower those expectations a little. Still though, Mando and Grogu together are naturally entertaining enough to carry this movie. Next up, we've got Star Wars Attack of the Clones with a score of 6.2 out of 10. And honestly, this movie is way overhated. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Does it have some horrendous dialogue? 100%. But there's actually a lot of stuff in this movie that I really enjoyed. First off, Obi-Wan Kenobi completely carried this film. While Anakin is busy trying to impress Padme with the worst flirt in galactic history, Obi-Wan is out here starring in his own detective movie. Bro spends the entire film investigating assassination attempts, uncovering secret clone armies, hunting bounty hunters, and exposing conspiracies. It generally feels like a Star Wars detective story, and I love it. Then there's the action. The Coruscant speed chaser is great, the asteroid field battle with Jango Fett is amazing, and those seismic charges, oh my days. You hear that silence for a split second, and then your speakers get absolutely violated. Still one of the coolest sound effects in the entire franchise. The Geonosis Arena battle is also just pure fun. Jedi everywhere, creatures everywhere, absolute chaos. And then we got Yoda pulling out a lightsaber for the first time. I don't care what anybody says, people lost their minds when that happened. Now let's talk about the biggest criticism, the romance. Yeah, some of the dialogue of this was rough.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Every time Anakin starts flirting, I can physically feel Padme reconsidering her life choices, and honestly, some of the acting doesn't help either. Now, before anyone gets mad, Hayden Christensen gets way too much blame because a lot of the dialogue he was given was impossible to make sound natural, but there are definitely scenes where the performance feels stiff and awkward. At times it feels less like two people falling in love and more like they're reading a school presentation to each other. Still, I will defend one thing, Anakin being socially awkward actually makes sense. This guy spent his childhood as a slave that got raised by space monks who basically banned relationships. Of course he's weird around girls. The movie also does a ton of Star Wars lore. We get Jango Fett, we get Count Dooku, we learn where the clone army comes from, we see the first real steps towards the Clone Wars, and we start to see Palpatine's plan slowly fall into place. That's what makes this movie better on rewatches. When you're younger, it's just lightsabers and explosions. When you're older, you realize Palpatine is basically running circles around the entire galaxy. The heroes think they're winning, but every victory is actually helping the Sith take over. It's honestly pretty clever. So yeah, Attack of the Clones definitely has some problems. The romance is awkward, some of the acting is stiff, and a few scenes drag a bit, but the action, world building, mystery, and setup for the Clone Wars make a much better movie than people give it credit for. Next up we've got Star Wars The Force Awakens with a score of 7 out of 10. And honestly, this movie was pretty solid start for the sequels trilogy. Unfortunately, the words solid start are doing a lot of heavy lifting considering what happened afterwards. Back in 2015, this movie had a massive job. It had to bring Star Wars back after a decade away and introduce a whole new generation of characters and convince people that Disney hadn't completely broken the franchise. And for the most part, it actually succeeded. This movie is fun, it's fast paced, it looks fantastic, and it generally got people excited about Star Wars again. The new cast was also a huge win. Finn was interesting, Poe was cool, Kylo Ren instantly stood out because he wasn't just another Vader clone. He was emotional, unstable, and consistently losing his mind. Watching Kylo Ren smash computer consoles whenever things didn't go his way was honestly hilarious. He felt different. And that's what made him interesting. The visuals are incredible too, the action scenes look amazing, the lightsaber duel in the snowy forest is still one of the coolest fight scenes in the sequel trilogy, and as always, John Williams absolutely cooked. Rey's theme alone is enough to remind you why he's the GOAT. Now, with all that said, this movie definitely has problems. The biggest one, it's basically a New Hope wearing a fake mustache. Think about it, desert planet, young hero, droid carrying important information, evil masked villain, mentor dies, huge planet killing superweapon, final trench style attack. Bro, we've literally seen this movie before. The entire thing feels like Disney is playing as safe as humanly possible, instead of pushing the story forward in a new direction. They basically hit a copy and paste on the original trilogy, and that's probably why some people call it more of a reboot than a sequel. The world building also isn't great. 30 years passed after Return of the Jedi, and somehow we're right back to Rebels versus the Empire again. Except now they're called the Resistance and the First Order. It's basically the same conflict with a different logo slapped on it. And then there's Rey. Now before people start typing essays, I don't hate Rey, I just think she's kinda boring. Daisy Ridley gives a good performance. That's not the issue though. The problem is that compared to characters like Luke, Anakin, or even Kylo Ren, Rey just isn't interesting to me. A lot of her development feels rushed, and she never really becomes a character I was heavily invested in. Meanwhile, Kylo over here is carrying half the emotional weight of the trilogy by himself. The most frustrating thing though is looking back at this movie now, because it actually set up generally interesting mysteries. Who is Snoke? Who are Rey's parents? Where did Luke go? What's going to happen with Finn? And then the next two movies basically spend their entire runtime arguing with each other instead of answering those questions properly. So while The Force Awakens isn't perfect, it's a fun movie, it's entertaining, it brought Star Wars back into the spotlight, and at time it generally felt like the start of something exciting. Too bad the rest of the trilogy couldn't stick the landing. Next up we've got Rogue One with a score of 8 out of 10, and I can't lie, the first time I watched this movie I thought it was kinda boring. I know, put your pitchforks down, but after watching both seasons of Andor, this movie got way better for me. Because now you actually understand how much sacrifice, manipulation and suffering went into building the rebellion. Andor adds so much weight to everything that happens in Rogue One. What used to feel like random rebels doing missions now feels like a culmination of years of struggle. And honestly, that's what makes this movie special. Unlike most Star Wars movies, there are no Jedi coming to save the day, no chosen one, no prophecy, no magical force destiny, just ordinary people risking everything because they believe in a cause. And that's what gives this movie such a different vibe. This is basically a Star Wars version of a war movie. The rebellion actually feels desperate, people actually die, mistakes have consequences, and victory feels earned. The Battle of Scarif is absolutely incredible. The space battle, the ground battle, the Death Star showing up, everything just works. It's easily one of the best large-scale battles in the entire franchise. And then there's K2SO. This dude was carrying the comedy of this movie on his back. Every time he opened his mouth, he had me laughing. One of the best droids Star Wars ever introduced. The cast is generally really solid also. Jyn Erso, Cassian, Shurat Baze, Bodhi, everybody has a role to play. Now, I will say one criticism I still agree with. The first half of the movie can be a little messy. It jumps between planets so much that sometimes it feels like the movie's speedrunning a galaxy tour. And because there's so many characters, you don't always get enough time to connect with all of them before the final act. But once the Scarif battle starts, yeah, this movie takes off. And then Darth Vader. Oh my days, that hallway scene is generally one of the coolest moments in Star Wars history. For years we kept hearing stories about how terrifying Vader was. This movie finally showed it. No jokes, no mercy, just pure nightmare feel. The way this movie transitions directly into A New Hope is also brilliant. It makes the opening of the original Star Wars feel even more important, and honestly, after Andor, the emotional impact hits even harder. You realize just how many people had to sacrifice everything just so Leia could get those Death Star plans. So yeah, Rogue One is one of the best Disney-era Star Wars movies. Next up we've got Return of the Jedi with a score of 8.5 out of 10. And honestly, this movie has one job: stick the landing. And thankfully, it absolutely does. Now, is it as good as the other two movies in the original trilogy? In my opinion, no. But as a conclusion to the original trilogy, it's fantastic. This movie gives us one of the greatest endings in cinema history. Everything with Luke, Vader and the Emperor is absolutely perfection, because at this point the story isn't really about blowing up another Death Star. It's about Luke trying to save his father. That's the real battle. And honestly, that's what makes the finale so powerful. Luke knows Vader has done horrible things. The entire galaxy sees Vader as a monster, but Luke still believes there's good left in him. And somehow he's right. The throne room scenes are generally some of the best scenes in Star Wars. The Emperor is absolutely cooking the entire time in those scenes. Bro spends the whole movie sitting in a chair and somehow becomes one of the most entertaining characters on screen. Every line from him is just pure manipulation. He's basically the galaxy's biggest professional hater. And then we get the final lightsaber duel between Luke and Vader. Yes, there aren't no crazy flips or giant choreography, but it's just pure emotion. That's what makes it good. When Vader threatens Leia and Luke finally snaps, oh my days, that scene was incredible. John Williams again absolutely carries it with the music too. And then comes one of my favourite moments in the entire franchise. Luke looks at Vader, severed robot hand, looks at his own robotic hand, and realizes he's becoming exactly what the Emperor wants. So he throws away his lightsaber and says, "I'm a Jedi, like my father before me." Absolute cinema. The moment alone almost earns the movie its score. Now obviously this movie isn't perfect. Let's talk about the Ewoks. Look, I don't hate them, but you're asking me to believe that a teddy bear defeats one of the Empire's most elite military units? That's a tough sell. The Endor stuff can definitely feel a little too childish at times, especially coming right after the doctor tone of Empire Strikes Back. And yeah, blowing up another Death Star wasn't exactly the most original idea either. You can definitely tell George Lucas was playing things a bit safer this time around. But honestly, the emotional payoff is so strong that I don't really care. Han gets his ending, Leia gets her ending, and Luke gets his ending. And obviously Vader gets his redemption. Honestly, if the sequel trilogy didn't happen, this would be the perfect ending ever. But obviously it happened, so it kind of ruined everything. But the original trilogy gets the satisfying conclusion it deserves anyway. Plus that final celebration scene just leaves you with the biggest smile on your face. Next up we've got A New Hope with a score of 9 out of 10. And honestly, without this movie, none of the others would even exist. This is the movie that started everything. The movie that turned Star Wars into a global phenomenon. The movie that somehow convinced millions of people that laser swords, space wizards, and a giant walking carpet were the coolest things ever. And nearly 50 years later, it's still amazing. Now obviously some parts have aged. This movie came out in 1977. There are scenes that are literally older than some people's grandparents. So yeah, the pacing can feel a bit slower compared to modern blockbusters, and the lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan and Vader definitely isn't a win in any choreography awards. Compared to the prequels, it looks like two dads arguing over who gets the TV remote. But honestly, I don't even care, because this movie absolutely nails the basics. Luke Skywalker is instantly likable, Han Solo is effortlessly cool, Leia is one of the best characters in the whole franchise, and Obi-Wan is so iconic. And Vader immediately establishes himself as one of the greatest movie villains ever. The world building is also unbelievable as well. Think about it, this was the first Star Wars movie ever, yet from the opening minutes it feels like this galaxy has existed for thousands of years. There's history everywhere. Old wars, ancient religions, political conflict, bounty hunters, smugglers, the Empire, the Rebellion. Literally, the universe feels like it was lived in from day one. And that's one of the reasons Star Wars became so popular. It felt real. The practical effects deserve so much respect too. Nowadays, every blockbuster is packed with CGI, but seeing all those models, miniatures, and practical sets still give the movie a unique charm. The space battles especially hold up surprisingly well. That final Death Star attack is still tense even after all these years. And then there's the soundtrack. Again, John Williams was absolutely cooking with this soundtrack. The only really criticism I have is that a few scenes can feel a little dated, the pacing isn't always perfect, some of the dialogue is a bit stiff, and Leia recovers from her entire planet being destroyed way quicker than any normal person would. But those are tiny complaints compared to everything this movie gets right, because at the end of the day, A New Hope is a pure adventure, it's simple, it's fun, and it's timeless. And while other Star Wars movies might have the biggest action scenes or darker stories, very few capture the sense of wonder as perfectly as this one. Next up we've got Revenge of the Sith with a score of 9.4 out of 10. And let's be real, this is the best prequel movie and it's not even close. For years people clowned on the prequels. The Revenge of the Sith came along and reminded everyone that George Lucas could still absolutely cook when he wanted to. This movie is basically 2.5 hours of pure pain. Everything's falling apart, the Republic is collapsing, the Jedi are getting played, friendships are being destroyed, and Palpatine is sitting back smiling because his master plan is finally working. The best thing about this movie is the emotional weight, because unlike most Star Wars films, you already know how it ends. You know Anakin becomes Darth Vader, you know the Jedi get wiped out, you know the Empire takes over. The entire movie is basically watching a train crash in slow motion and being completely unable to stop it. And somehow that makes it even more heartbreaking. Ewan McGregor is absolutely incredible here as well. This is peak Obi-Wan. Every scene he's in, it just works. For example, he's badass when he needs to be, he's heartbreaking when he needs to be, and he's funny when he needs to be. And honestly, it's one of the best performances in Star Wars history. And Hayden Christensen deserves way more credit than he actually got. For years people blamed him for everything. Then everyone grew up and realized, wait, he was actually pretty good in Revenge of the Sith. You can generally feel Anakin's fear, anger, and desperation throughout the movie. He isn't turning evil because he's power hungry, he's terrified of losing Padme, and Palpatine manipulates that fear perfectly. Speaking of Palpatine, bro deserves a Hall of Fame spot for Hayden. This man spent 3 movies gaslighting the entire galaxy, the Jedi, the Senate, and Anakin. Literally everybody, and somehow nobody figured out until it was too late. The action is also incredible. The opening battle of Coruscant, the duel with Count Dooku, Yoda vs Palpatine, Obi-Wan vs Grievous. This movie just keeps throwing bangers at you. And then we get Mustafar. Oh my days. Anakin vs Obi-Wan is still one of the greatest lightsaber fights ever made. The choreography, the emotion, the music, the lava everywhere. It's absolute cinema. Because it isn't just two Jedis fighting. It's two brothers destroying each other. And when Obi-Wan says, "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." Yeah, that still hurts. John Williams also, obviously, absolutely cooked with the Battle of the Heroes. One of the best Star Wars tracks ever made. Now look, the movie isn't perfect. There are definitely a few clunky lines, some of the political scenes drag out a little, and I do understand why some people think Anakin's final turn happens a bit quickly. But honestly, none of these issues come close to ruining the experience, because the highs are so high. Order 66 alone is enough to make Star Wars fans emotionally unstable. Watching the Jedi get wiped out like that when the music plays is generally heartbreaking. And then seeing Vader rise as the Empire takes control perfectly bridges the gap between the prequels and the original trilogy. This movie delivers exactly what it promises: the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, the fall of the Jedi, and the rise of Darth Vader. And it does it brilliantly. And finally, in first place with a perfect 10 out of 10 rating, it's The Empire Strikes Back. And honestly, what is there even left to say? This movie is Star Wars at its absolute peak. Not just the best Star Wars movie of all time, it's one of the greatest movies ever made, period. Everything about this film just works. The stories, the characters, the action, the music, and the pacing. It's basically George Lucas and the team accidentally discovering the secret recipe for cinematic perfection. Right from the opening, the Battle of Hoth, this movie grabs you and never lets you go. The AT-AT walkers are still some of the coolest things Star Wars has ever created. Even decades later, they still look incredible. Then you've got Luke beginning his Jedi training with Yoda, and let's be honest, nobody expected this tiny green gremlin to become one of the most iconic characters in movie history. At first you're sitting there like, why is this weird little goblin stealing Luke's food? Then 10 minutes later he's dropping life-changing wisdom like he's the galaxy's greatest philosopher. Yoda is absolutely amazing in this movie, and unlike a lot of the sequels, Empire actually takes risks. The heroes don't just win again, things get worse, a lot worse. Han gets captured, Luke gets humbled, the rebellion gets destroyed. Everybody is struggling, and that's what makes the movie feel so much more mature than A New Hope. The characters grow because they fail, and then there's Darth Vader. Oh my days. This is the Darth Vader movie. He goes from being an amazing villain to arguably the greatest movie villain ever. Every scene he's in is iconic, every line is memorable. The amount of aura this man has should honestly be illegal. And then we get that moment, you know that moment, the twist that changed cinema forever. Even people who have never watched Star Wars know it. One of the most famous reveals in movie history. A scene so iconic that it completely transformed the franchise forever. No spoilers needed, you already know. John Williams as well absolutely cooks. The Imperial March is introduced here and instantly becomes one of the most recognizable pieces of music ever made. You hear those first few notes and immediately know someone's about to have a bad day. And honestly, I struggle to find real flaws with this movie. Sure, if you really wanted to nitpick, you could probably find something, but every time I watch it, it just reminds me why it's considered the gold standard for the originals. It takes everything A New Hope did well and somehow improves it. Bigger story, better characters, higher stakes, more emotion, more Vader. What more can you want? This movie is just a complete masterpiece. Well, that's it. All Star Wars movies ranked. But what did you all think? Put your rankings in the comments below. See you in the next video.